Rob Tebbutt here for One-on-One Boxing, and welcome to my preview of this weekend's heavyweight rematch between Zhilei Zhang and Joe Joyce. Before we look at this weekend, let's go back to April and look at the first fight. Zhilei Zhang with a 6th round stoppage win over Joe Joyce, really shocking the boxing world, becoming the first man to not only beat Joe Joyce but stopping him. The granite-chinned Joe Joyce buzzed heavily in the second round and repeatedly throughout the fight by that backhand from the southpaw Zhilei Zhang, and the right hook as well doing plenty of damage, as we saw marked up on Joe Joyce's face, that eye in a real terrible state by the time the doctor called an end to the bout in the 6th round. Can Zhilei Zhang repeat the feat this weekend? Joe Joyce coming into the fight says he's going to be a bit heavier, says he's going to be able to hold those shots, and of course will be able to move his head away from that southpaw left hand, which we didn't see in the first fight. I'm sure himself and his trainer Ismail Salas will have their own revenge plan in store for this weekend. But before we hear from them, let's hear from Big Bang Zhang himself, who is going to be keen to reiterate his stance as one of the best heavyweights in the world and will be looking for a repeat this weekend against Joe Joyce.
这是一个规律，然后你想在短期内你让有太大的改变，那是不可能的。然后他可能会稍加去做一些很小的一些改变，但是改变不会太大。然后所以说我们现在还是注重把我们所有的注意力，然后放在训练上面，然后从上一场比赛中总结的一些经验，然后一些缺点，然后在这一期训练营中把我们的这些不足然后弥补上去，然后下一场比赛会更加精彩。
So that was Zhilei Zhang in very, very confident spirits ahead of his bout with Joe Joyce this weekend. Going into that first fight, everybody was talking about Joe Joyce's chin, about he's the juggernaut, about how he can't be stopped, he can't be hurt. But we saw that any man can be hurt, certainly when you're in there with a man the size of Zhilei Zhang. But Zhilei Zhang now will be looking to get past Joe Joyce in similar fashion as to the first fight and then line up some of those big fights. Of course, we've got Tyson Fury boxing Francis Ngannou at the end of October. Could Zhilei Zhang, as the WBO mandatory, potentially get a crack at Alexander Usyk? We're still waiting to see what happens to Alexander Usyk after that win over Daniel Dubois. But for Zhilei Zhang, the world is his oyster. Of course, a massive star in the Far East out in China. Could we see a big fight for Zhilei Zhang on the back of this at the Bird's Nest in Beijing? We'll have to wait and see. But one man, of course, who will be looking to scupper those plans and put himself very much back into the heavyweight title picture is the juggernaut himself, Joe Joyce, and here's what he had to say ahead of his rematch this weekend.
I just need to be better. I need to have my tactics right, the game plan right, and everything practiced in place so I can put on a display that I believe I can. I believe I can win this fight, and that's why I've taken the rematch and not the scenic route round.
So that was Joe Joyce admitting some of his failures in the first fight, and he really does need to change and change quite dramatically if he's going to reverse that defeat and get back on track to become one of the best heavyweights in the world. But is it going to be that easy? Joe Joyce, who has dined out on that chin, dined out on being able to walk through fire and get guys out of there. This is the first time we've seen him in with somebody who he can't just walk through. Zhilei Zhang, fast hands for a big man as well, complicating things further with that southpaw style, and has genuine knockout power in both hands. Is Joe Joyce going to be able to go in there with that same confidence? Does he need the same confidence? For me, I think Joyce has to look at this from a technical perspective, get out of the way of that southpaw left hand. He has a man in the corner, Ismail Salas, the great Cuban coach, who would have seen his fair share of southpaws over the year, and it will be over to Ismail Salas to devise the game plan in order to get Joe Joyce back on track. So let's hear from Ismail Salas, who had this to say ahead of this weekend.
We need to increase or improve, improve the defensive skill wise. So that's why we are working on it. How we will do is, I don't need to tell anyone, but we try to do the better, how we can improve the defensive skill. They have 3 kinds of defense, with the feet, with the arm, with the body.
So that was Ismail Salas plotting the revenge mission for Joe Joyce, but it's going to be a very, very tricky outing for Ismail Salas this weekend. We're not used to seeing fighters being able to make such drastic shifts in between first and second fights. We've seen in the heavyweight division of recent times Anthony Joshua reversing his loss to Andy Ruiz by changing his style up. We've seen recently with Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith, Chris Eubank Jr. going straight back in there after being stopped and producing a career best performance. Can Joe Joyce do the same? One thing's for sure, he's likely going to have to be in the best shape of his career in order to get the win over Zhilei Zhang this weekend. But one man who is very much confident in him doing so is his promoter, Frank Warren, who of course promotes WBC heavyweight champion Tyson Fury. Here's what he had to say about Joe Joyce and the changes he has to make in order to emerge victorious this weekend.
He was kept getting caught with that shot, and it was unfortunate that he just couldn't get out of the way of it. And I think that when it started closing, I think he really did struggle with it. He can't do that again. If he does that again, coming too light. I think he came in light. I want to see him. He's got first thing to have to do is move. If he don't learn from it, if he don't start moving his head, get out there, then it'll be the same result. And his career is on the line. That's a fact. His career's on the line for this fight.
So that was Frank Warren, and he's putting it all on the table. Joe Joyce's career is on the line this weekend against Zhilei Zhang, and that's from his promoter, Frank Warren, who does know a little bit about heavyweight boxing. And I have to agree with him. Joe Joyce, on the back of that stoppage loss back in April, now doesn't have the WBO Interim heavyweight title, which, while people may not like it, does give you that opportunity. It is currency in the heavyweight division and can lead you towards a big fight. Without that, Joe Joyce at this stage of his career, who's going to want to fight him? That's the hard, cold truth. Can he make those adjustments? I think I agree with Frank Warren. We need to see him not only moving his head, but putting a little bit more weight back on, getting back up to that weight that we saw him in against Joseph Parker. I felt like that was a very good version of Joe Joyce. I felt his movement was much better than we saw against Zhilei Zhang in April. But I think everybody's in agreement that this fight will come down to whether or not Joe Joyce can get out of the way of that southpaw left hand. That's the shot from Zhilei Zhang that did all of the damage in April. But we've seen in the past from Zhilei Zhang, it's not only the left hand. He dropped Filip Hrgović with a right hook, hurt him several times throughout that fight. Joe Joyce can't just be focusing on that left hand because he may walk into a right hook. It's a very, very dangerous fight for Joe Joyce. Now, does he need to go back to the juggernaut that we saw against Daniel Dubois and get that jab out? Get the jab out, try and keep Zhilei Zhang at distance, at range, no free shots early in the fight, and try and take Zhilei Zhang into the second half of the fight. Now, we've seen from Zhilei Zhang, not only in the last fight, but in his professional career against Jerry Forrest, against Filip Hrgović, where he starts very, very strongly and then has a tendency to fade. We all know about Joe Joyce's stamina, his endurance, and his toughness. If he can take the fight into the second half, then he has a very, very good chance of winning. But in order to do so, he cannot take the same punishment as he took early in the first fight. Zhilei Zhang is far too dangerous, hits far too hard, and Joe Joyce cannot afford to be hit by those same shots again. I think Joe Joyce can get it done. Will he get it done? For me, with how dominant Zhilei Zhang was in the first fight, it's difficult to look past him. It doesn't mean that Joe Joyce can't win the fight, but Zhilei Zhang's so dominant and so emphatic in that first fight, you'd think that he's going to be full of confidence going into the rematch. Now, not only does Zhilei Zhang know that he can hurt Joe Joyce, but most importantly, Joe Joyce now knows Zhilei Zhang can hurt him. Will that help him? Will that make Joe Joyce go back to the drawing board, becoming more technically proficient and defensively sound? Or will it get in his head? Will he be going in there wary of the fact that this man can hurt him? This man can knock him out? We're going to have to wait and see this Saturday. A very, very intriguing heavyweight rematch. But for me, I have to edge towards Zhilei Zhang after that first fight, after the dominance that he displayed in the first fight. My pick will be on Zhilei Zhang to repeat the trick and get another win over Joe Joyce this weekend. Let us know who you think will emerge victorious in the comments. But from me, Rob Tebbutt, here at One on One Boxing, I'll catch up with you soon.